Hey everyone, Raptorspank here, and I've got something a little bit different as something I've done in the past. We're going to be doing a box break today. We're opening a box of Everfest because it's first edition. We might get some sweet cold foils, or more likely, we'll get an amulet like we did in the last box I opened. But who knows? We could get a cold foil legendary or Bravo star of the show now that he's unplayable. In every format that exists. But why am I opening a box? Am I just doing it for fun? No, this is, I was trying to think of what would be a good video to do for this, and I thought a fun little box opening would be a good way to do this. And normally I wouldn't use the webcam because it kind of cuts off some of the screen. Can't see all of the sweet cards I pulled, and in fact I'll make this just a little bit smaller so I have a little more space to work with. But I'm using the webcam this time because this is a couple of days before when this video will be going live. But when this video goes live, when you're watching it, it may or may not be June 5th, which is 2 years since my first video on YouTube was. I've been doing this for 2 years now, so I thought this would be a fun little 2-year anniversary video. I was going to open a box. I figured that was kind of the cool thing I could do this time around, now that I've switched to doing Flesh and Blood over the last year, instead of doing some like highlights of other games like Legends of Runeterra that I had played previously and that sort of stuff. I'm going to instead just open a box and kind of talk about where we've gone over the last year and where I see this channel going, and kind of what all my plans are. And so this may not be the most exciting thing to watch the webcam for, because a lot of it's probably going to be me looking down at the cards, but I will try to look up into the camera too from time to time, just so I can kind of talk about the channel and all that. And this is going to be a little bit less of a focus on the cards themselves than some of my previous box breaks, where it's been all about the cards and trying to get cool cards and sort of talking about like all the cool commoner staples and stuff like that. There are a lot of really good commoner staples in this set, so that's part of the reason I'm doing Everfest. I thought about opening a box of History Pack because I really probably won't get a box otherwise and open it, so this would have been like the perfect opportunity for me to do History Pack. But I'm not a huge white border fanatic, and also too, part of the fun with box breaks, I mean, like, there's a bunch of chase cards like Arcanite Skullcap in the history packs, but the big fun stuff with opening boxes are the foils, especially the cold foils, and History Pack has no foils whatsoever, so it just seemed to make the most sense to me to just do an Everfest box, since it's one of the most recent sets, and it's one I particularly like a lot because there's a lot of good commoner cards in here, and just some cool cards in general. So even if we get like some of the non-commoner cards like the merchant stuff, I'd be really happy about that. I want to get into Ultimate Pit Fighter at some point, and I built a Cavdane deck, so like if I got the merchant legendary, for example, I'd be ecstatic. If I got Genius, because I don't have Genius yet, I'd also be pretty ecstatic about that, because I think he probably is the more competitive merchant, although Cavdane can be played in Commoner, and Genius cannot, so that's always a little bit sad. You know what? We're going to put the other stack on top of the Legends of Runeterra Victory Cube, because that way, when I open the last pack, we'll have a little victory message. Woo! But before I get too deep into these packs, I kind of just want to thank everyone for sticking around. I know I kind of made a big change around kind of the fall of last year when I switched from doing Legends of Runeterra content to Flesh and Blood, and there's a couple of big reasons I made that change. So I figured I don't know that I've ever really discussed it on one of my videos, so I figured I'd just talk about sort of why the change came about to begin with. So for people who have been around since the beginning and seen all my Legends of Runeterra content, I really enjoyed that card game. It's one of the best card games I've ever played. It's still one of my favorites, but basically the content that did best for me was always the competitive stuff, the competitive deck guide and gameplay and all that stuff. I also think that's just what I personally do best, is when I'm talking through my plays, why I'm doing it, that sort of thing. Which unfortunately it's a lot harder to do in Flesh and Blood when, you know, my opponent is right there at the same table, and if I'm talking through all of my decisions, they can hear me talking through those decisions and know the decisions that I'm making. But I do try to kind of go into more details, talk about the thought processes after I've made them, after the actions happen. So I think that is one of the things I do best, is that it's not my deck building, it's really my ability to take decks, kind of refine them, and then master playing them and explain them to other people. I think that's always what I've done best. And so my best series, the videos that did the best, were the On the Grind videos. They're also the ones I enjoyed making the most, to be honest. When I started this channel, and the first video on this channel back on June 5th of 2020 now, that video was kind of what I thought the channel would be, which was Stiff Brews, sort of a take on Against the Odds by Saffron Olive with MTG Goldfish, except for Legends of Runeterra. The thing is, those videos never really did all that well. I mean, the Legion's Marauder stuff is still some of my best videos on the channel, which is really, really sweet, because those were such fun decks to play. But it's actually the On the Grind series that took off the most, that people enjoyed the most, and I love that, because those were fun videos to make, and those were enjoyable decks and stuff like that. But the problem is that when they stopped really caring about the competitive scene, or like shaking up the meta, like when I started doing that series, when it really started to take off, we were still getting very regular updates. Like every 2 to 3 weeks there'd be major buffs and changes to a bunch of different cards, so the meta was constantly changing, and so there was always new decks to play and new decks to explain. When I stopped doing On the Grind, that changed, because it all started to become a very, very samey meta, where it was just like all the same decks at the top again, and so it was like a lot of repeat decks, or a lot of playing bad decks. And playing bad decks is not very fun, especially when you're trying to be like a competitive series. Bad decks are not competitive. They can be fun, they can be exciting, but they're not going to be the best of the best, which means that they don't really make sense in a competitive series. And the places that I posted those videos, like the Lore Competitive Reddit, that's not really the right place for bad decks. So then the answer is I just have to focus on the competitive decks. But the problem is they're all the same decks, so I would just be doing the same deck guide over and over again. And it didn't really make sense to do the deck guide one week and then do a guide on the same exact deck the next week. So it was either just going to be gameplay, which didn't tend to do as well as like the full deck guides did, or bad decks that don't really fit the competitive vibe of it. So in the end, it just didn't really feel right. Where things were at, it just wasn't. Ooh, there's our first foil. Is pick a card, any card. But it just didn't seem right to keep doing it, and just in general, I wasn't enjoying the meta anymore. It was not something I was particularly having fun with. So actually, we'll keep the comments over here, but then we'll put foils and rares over into here. So this will be our foil pile. Yeah, it just didn't make sense to. It wasn't fun. I wasn't enjoying making the videos anymore, and because of that, hey, there we go. What a find right off the rip. We got a genus. What you need. So that's pretty sweet. Let's see if I can get that to focus a little bit better. Whoop. I'm not used to doing this with 2 different webcams. But Genius is the merchant hero I was talking about. That pretty excited to get this guy, because I think he is a much better merchant in general, and he still has a lot of the sort of group hug vibes that Cavdane also has. We'll put this over here, I guess. It's a problem with the webcam. It doesn't really give me a good spot to put these cards. I suppose, you know what, maybe the right answer is to actually move the webcam up here, because it is a little bit more flat down here, so I can actually stack cards. So we'll do that. Foils. So we'll do foils, commons, foils. Then we'll do rares. Actually, we're gonna we're gonna no wait, what? Okay, all right. I'm deciding on the fly here. We're gonna do regular rares over here, and then we'll do foils here, majestics here, and if we find a legendary, who knows what we'll do with it. But yeah, so that's basically why I started moving away from Legends of Runeterra content. It just, the meta really wasn't fun, and especially too since I did post to Lore Competitive, one of the requirements for that Reddit was that you had to be a platinum rank or higher. So I did have to keep maintaining my my rank, and obviously I did pretty well at that because I stayed in Masters for 8 straight seasons, and my last season, the 9th season, I was starting to grind towards it, and then I just realized that I didn't really care anymore. I didn't have to be Masters anymore. I kind of proved to myself what I needed to prove. I maintained it for well over a year through many different metas with many different decks. So it's just, I didn't need to keep doing it for myself, and since it just wasn't fun anymore, it just, yeah, the whole situation was just sucking my fun out of Legends of Runeterra by just grinding for Masters all the time, so I have to play all these good decks to grind for Masters too, and just playing the same deck over and over again. It just wasn't what really helped me create great videos early on, and I think my quality, like the quality of my videos, went down because I was just feeling kind of burnt out and drained with all of the different the different issues that were going on in ranked at that time. But then there was something else, one other difference too that really led me to the Flesh and Blood content now, is that I got into Legends of Runeterra through Magic the Gathering. Magic was one of the card games. I played it a little bit when I was younger, but I mostly only started like a few years ago. And I stopped playing Magic myself too, but what really drew me into Magic was the sense of community. I loved just going and hanging out with people and talking. Like, it became my kind of like social get out, was going to Friday Night Magic, playing modern F&M, and didn't really matter if I won or I lost. It was just really, really fun. I mean, I tried very hard to win every time I played because I'm just a very competitive person in general. So it was kind of a good outlet for my competitive drive, but also too, it was my opportunity to meet people and talk, and it was my community outlet, and that was totally missing with Legends of Runeterra. I mean, there were some great conversations that came out of, like, especially the lore competitive subreddit. It was like a really, really neat community and all that, but it's just not the same as like in person talking to people and getting to know people and that sort of thing. And so that's why really Flesh and Blood took off so much for me, is that I just enjoy, even if it's just James that I've been playing with lately on the channel and all that, it's just, it's a whole new experience to have two people there and like talking with someone and sharing in the laughs and the triumphs, that kind of stuff. And it's just a whole different feeling than when you're just playing Legends of Runeterra online and you're getting like taunted with the spam emotes and stuff like that. It's just, it's a totally different atmosphere, and that's what really brought me into doing Flesh and Blood. And I love the idea of Pauper in Magic. I didn't play it too much because I never really got into the MTGO thing. I do have an account. I've played it a few times, and Pauper was probably what I played the most, including a deck I built in Pauper that was really, really fun. It wasn't good, but it was very, very fun. But essentially, I always loved Pauper, but there was no Pauper scene in my area. There's also not much of a Flesh and Blood scene. Last I knew anyways. Things may have changed at some of my local game stores in the area, but when we did the Tales of Aria, we did a pre-release of it, and we had to drive like over an hour to get to that pre-release, so it's pretty hard for us to go to events, which is also why we constantly make rule mistakes, because we don't have to deal with any judge fixing our mistakes, so we just kind of have to learn as we go. So bear with us on that. That's why we're still making mistakes and learning from them now. The Ironhide discussion from our recent Kasai Dorinthia game comes to mind, but basically I didn't get to go heavy into Pauper for Magic. It's just a few times online and at a couple of GPs I went to. but it was always a format I liked because of how much cheaper it could be than other formats, although there are some ridiculously expensive Magic Pauper decks, and hopefully Flesh and Blood never really gets to that level, but I could see that happening too. But it's hard to say where we'll end up in, you know, a couple of years or whatever, but this was just a really cool... When I saw Channel Fireball was going to do Pauper, or Commoner Blitz as they were calling it even then, and I saw their rule sets for it, I was like, okay, this is just going to be really fun. I was like, James and I have to try this, because I love building tons of decks. And it's just, I spent too much money in Magic on too many modern decks, and then when things would get banned and you'd lose the deck, it hurt. Like when my Mox Opals got banned from my Affinity deck, which is also part of the reason I stopped playing Magic, is that Affinity was my favorite deck, always has been, always will be, and losing Mox Amber or Mox Opal really crippled that deck for a long time. I know it's kind of making a comeback now, but it's one of those things that have been out long enough that it's like, do I really want to drop $200 on Urza's Sagas so I can play Affinity again? Not really, but but essentially, this is a really great format for me to make a ton of different decks and get to play a ton of different heroes. And so that obviously appeals to me. And then, two, once we tried out the format, and I think the Dash Chained game, the very first Pauper video that's on my channel, when that happened, I think that really just opened my eyes to how fun this format could be, because here I am with commons only playing Dash, and I did over 20 damage to James in a single turn. It's like, oh, okay, Pauper is actually a powerful format, which you can still do crazy things despite the limited card pool. And speaking of which, there's a payload. So I think it's just, I realized pretty quickly that this is going to be a fun format, and it's definitely where I fully intend to continue diving deeper into. And in fact, there's a number of different things I've planned for this. Like, there's going to be a lot more Commoner gameplay, and we're still doing the Commoner podcast. Those are all great things that I love doing. But I have some kind of classic things coming back. Stuff I used to do for Legends of Runeterra, and the video will probably actually be coming out in maybe 2 days, I would say. Actually, as of recording, I've already finished editing it. I'm just kind of spacing out the uploads, but I'm very excited for that and to do more videos in that kind of series. So that's something I'm very excited about. So what I'm basically saying is that if you like Flesh and Blood Commoner, there's a lot more coming, and in fact, some of my best videos are still to come. I think it's only going to get better from here and here, because partially, I'm back into it and very excited about everything that's going on. I'm definitely enjoying the game. It's been a lot of fun. I know it's been a few ups and downs with some of my videos. We're doing a lot more sealed content originally. I actually have a ton of episodes of sealed that are filmed that still haven't seen the light of day, because the videos don't seem to do that well, and they do take a lot of effort to edit and publish, which is kind of why, if you watch some of my early videos, you'll see that I did slides with the cards coming up that we were playing and the health totals, and I stopped doing that because that's why it was taking so long for videos to come out, because that took an exceedingly high amount of time to do all those different slides. So it's just one of those things that I realized this wasn't worth doing if it meant like one video a month as opposed to a video every week. So there may be more sealed coming eventually. I would love to do, we did an Everfest sealed, we did a Crucible of War sealed. Those are some of the more neat sealed videos to put out, because the format's not made for sealed, or the sets aren't made for sealed. So I would love to get those out, and there was some Tales of Arya too that would be neat to get out at some point as well. But mainly my focus right now is on Commoner, because I think this format's got a lot of potential. I can't wait to see where it goes from here. And we got a Majestic, another one, Cash Out, and Emeritus Scalding, which was a card I was much more excited about when we could play them in Commoner. For people who aren't aware, there was a point in which Channel Fireball changed their rules. I think it lasted like a couple months at most. But they changed Commoner so that you could use up to 6 rares. I think that was their answer for how to get Kasai into the format, because Kasai without Centauri Sabers does nothing. And obviously we've seen what LSS's answer for it, which is honestly pretty clean and pretty nice. And definitely added some cool things to the format, because like Arcane Lantern in the 6 rares like version of Commoner was a terrible, terrible card. But now in a 2 rare equipment world, suddenly Arcane Lantern is the best card ever, which I would also love to pull one of those. But for a while you could do 6 rares, so we kind of changed our decks for that at one point, and when we looked at the Everfest cards for Commoner, we were looking at the rares, and there were some very neat stuff that we could have gotten out of that world. And in fact, we did play a game that we recorded it, and it will probably not see the light of day as well, because we recorded a game with Viserai versus Chain with 6 rares in each deck, and it was a very, very fun game. I definitely enjoyed that one, but we recorded that video on the same day we recorded the Ranger rares, and a couple days later they announced the official Commoner format, and suddenly that game did not matter anymore, because, well, it was no longer a deck that qualified as Commoner. So that was a little bit tragic, but I think ultimately this Commoner format is the best one that they've had yet. This is pretty cool, the normal card back Frostbite token. I would love to get a foil of this, because those are in this set, as well as Spectral Shields, which I think are the only foils of their kind for those tokens. So it would be very cool to get foils of those. Just like I have 2 foil Rune Chants from Crucible for my Viserai deck. But yeah, so that's kind of where things are at. Oh man, that's a cool. I love the High Striker foils. I think in this set too, there's like a full art one that's really, really cool too. I think we pulled at least one in the last box. But yeah, oh, Spring Tidings. Hey, I love that art. It's a really simple but really neat art, and that is also majestic. But yeah, so I think Commoner's heading in the right direction now that it's an official format. I would love to see them add a ban list at some point, because I do think some decks are a little bit too powerful. Like, Dash could very consistently do 18 to 22, 24 damage in a single turn, but it would take most of the game to do it, and you do it like once, and then that was it. And usually that's what it took. You just dirtled until you got that off, and so long as you're chipping damage into your opponent throughout the whole time, that was usually enough to finish them off. But Briar can do that, consistently do, let's see, 16 damage every turn, very easily, by just playing 4 power attacks. And if you do that so many turns in a row, it's like no deck can stand up to that. So I think something does need to be done about Briar to make the format healthier, but we did get to have Seeds of Agony come back for Chain, which I think now, having played so much more Commoner, James and I debated this a lot in the beginning about whether Seeds would be too powerful for the format, and I think it's actually just a really good, welcome addition to the format. Getting Seeds back really gives a lot more. It makes things a lot better for Chain. It makes him much more viable, which I think is just good for the format. I think it's good to have a good diversity, and the fact that all 3 Runeblades are very strong is really cool for Runeblade players, at least. Definitely, I think some classes need a little bit of help. Specifically, what comes to mind is Wizard, I think, needs a bit of help, but I'm not too concerned or screaming to the heavens about it, because I know Wizard is coming in the next set. So hopefully that makes it a little bit better, because Wizard is one of my favorite classes. I do have a almost fully foiled out Cano deck for Blitz. That's a normal Blitz deck. I'm just missing the Arcanite Skullcap, and my Finals is not foiled. But essentially, it's just I do really love Wizard. It's a very different way of playing the game, which is always fun. That's the big thing I think that Flesh and Blood needs, is just more ways to play the game. Because ultimately, right now, when you play a game of Flesh and Blood, it will end when your opponent, or when one player has their health total reach 0. And one of my favorite things in Magic was that you didn't necessarily have to kill your opponent to win the game. And there are some really bad things that come out of that too, for sure. Things like Thassa's Oracle are not good, healthy cards. But I'm a big fan. My favorite commander deck that I own is Zur the Enchanter, which is very similar to a Thoracle deck. But I have not put Thoracle in my Zur deck. It's still a Lab Maniac one where it's Ad Nauseam Doomsday Zur, so you try to draw from an empty deck and win for doing that. So there's just a lot of really cool alternate win conditions that make Magic a very fun card game because there's so many different decks you can play, and I think that's really what Flesh and Blood needs. Oh, I forgot to put this foil with the foils. That's really what Flesh and Blood needs for especially the multiplayer format to take off. And I know alternate win conditions is going to be kind of hard to pull off in, say, like, in Commoner, for example. That will be a lot harder to get away with, because when they print stuff like that, chances are they're going to be very limited and probably higher rarities. So we probably won't see a ton, but I would still love to see them print it just so that I can get more interest in the Ultimate Pit Fighter format. And I know alternate win conditions is going to be kind of hard to pull off in, say, like, in Commoner, for example. That will be a lot harder to get away with, because when they print stuff like that, chances are they're going to be very limited and probably higher rarities. So we probably won't see a ton, but I would still love to see them print it just so that I can get more interest in the Ultimate Pit Fighter format. And I know alternate win conditions is going to be kind of hard to pull off in, say, like, in Commoner, for example. That will be a lot harder to get away with, because when they print stuff like that, chances are they're going to be very limited and probably higher rarities. So we probably won't see a ton, but I would still love to see them print it just so that I can get more interest in the Ultimate Pit Fighter format. And I know alternate win conditions is going to be kind of hard to pull off in, say, like, in Commoner, for example. That will be a lot harder to get away with, because when they print stuff like that, chances are they're going to be very limited and probably higher rarities. So we probably won't see a ton, but I would still love to see them print it just so that I can get more interest in the Ultimate Pit Fighter format. And I know alternate win conditions is going to be kind of hard to pull off in, say, like, in Commoner, for example. That will be a lot harder to get away with, because when they print stuff like that, chances are they're going to be very limited and probably... I wish that was in Commoner, but the rares are gone. We don't get to have T-Bone again. Although Dash doesn't really need it. she is good enough without another zero-cost attack, so... Alright, on to the next pack. I'll try to pick up the pace a little bit more, so this isn't like a 60-minute video, although it very well may be, looking at the time right now. But, yeah, so that's the big thing. I foresee a lot of Flesh and Blood going forward in content, and I'll probably be looking for lots of new things to do. Maybe I'll try to do some, like, Ultimate Pit Fighter content, too, just for fun. It's a little bit harder to film gameplay for that, so I don't know how easy or how possible it would be for me to even do that, or if I'll just end up doing like 1v1 Ultimate Pit Fighter just to showcase like decks you can make, although obviously that makes certain decks, like the Cavnane deck I just described, like that's not going to be good for a 1v1 game. Like, it's just not. That's got to be something you play with multiple people. That's just the whole point of it. So maybe I'll end up doing some Ultimate Pit Fighter stuff just to get some more content, try some more formats. Maybe one day we'll try to do like something with regular Blitz decks, or we'll do more pre-cons or something like that too, but we'll kind of see where that goes. And certainly if there's anything you want to see or anything like that, and any particular Flesh and Blood content you're like, oh, there's not enough of this, someone else needs to add more to this, like, let me know in the comments. I would be happy to try different things within reason. I have not shelled out on a Eye of Ophidia or an Arcanite Skullcap for my Cano deck for reason, because when I like all of the Flesh and Blood I'm playing as Commoner, it just does not make sense for me to drop $500, $600 on two cards that I'll basically never use. But I mean, if people want to see powered up gameplay too, I'm sure I could figure out some sort of other options too, like Tabletop Simulator or something like that. I would love if LSS made their own online version of Flesh and Blood. I know they've mentioned that they don't really have plans to, because they wanted to focus on the tabletop and playing with people and all that. And obviously, I spent the beginning of this video talking about how much that matters to me and how much I enjoy that, and that's what really drew me to this. But I would love to have an online format too, because it would make it a lot easier for me to put out a bunch of videos, and then I could start doing like lots of commoner gameplay where it's just me taking into a league, seeing different, basically seeing one deck that I'd be piloting and see it up against a bunch of different things, stuff like that, which would be really, really cool to do. Ooh, a foil high roller, that's sick. Because I think that is some of the stuff that I did best in Legends of Runeterra, and I would love to do that sort of thing in Flesh and Blood too, where I can kind of deep dive into a deck a little bit better than, one game commoner videos, because if we just did like the paper ones and recorded it, and it would be, I don't know that it would be nearly as fun to just be me playing against James, and one of us stays with the same deck every time and the other one changes it. It's kind of less organic than taking it into like a ranked league or something like that. But, ooh, Runic Reclamation. That's pretty sweet. Lots of Aura Matters stuff in this set, which is really, really cool, and that's why Viserai became as good as he did in Commoner, is that this is the set where all the Shrill of the Shriekhorns and Freaking Corruptions and Drowning Dyers all came in and were a very good boost to Commoner Viserai. But yeah, so if there's anything anyone wants to see, or any decks you want showcased, and heroes, certainly let us know. We're kind of just winging it, so, we're always happy to try different heroes, different decks, and that sort of thing, and we're just kind of making heroes, or making decks as, like, our own personal interests, so if there's other decks that people are more interested in than the ones that we're personally interested in, it's not at all a problem for us to build some other deck. Like, I love diving into other decks too, and certainly there's not enough time for all the heroes I want to look at. Oh, that's sweet. There it is. That's one of the things we're looking for. Foil Frostbite token. There we go. This was one of the cold foils I wanted to get so bad. Here it is. It's a cold foil Arcane Lantern. That's such a good meme. That I'm talking about how much better this card became thanks to the new Commoner rules, and I pull a cold foil one of it. That is fantastic. I'm actually so stoked about this, even though it's not by any remote stretch of the sense like a crazy chase cold foil to pull, but man, oh, that is awesome. I'm so excited about that. That will definitely go into one of my commoner decks. Either Oldhim or Ira is gonna love that. That actually looks sick too. Is this how the normal card looks with a? I think it's different for the cold foil, because I think the usual Arcane Lantern would look similar to, at least I thought it looked similar to like a weapon, where like the text box would be halfway up and it would tell you what Arcane Barrier does, whereas this one has the small text box. So I don't know if that's unique to the cold foil or if this is just Arcane Lantern, because I haven't pulled any Arcane Lanterns before, but that's really cool. I'm so stoked about that. I mean, it's a rare, so it's like the lowest rarity cold foil I could get in the box, but like, oh, that's so cool. I was worried I was gonna get like another amulet or something, which would not have been as exciting, but that's such a awesome commoner playable, and a really cool artwork too, actually. So there we go. There's our cold foil, although that doesn't necessarily mean it's the only one in the box. I don't remember reading anything about the cold foil rate changing, but not to spoil the sealed Everfest video that's coming, but we did pull 2 cold foils out of that box, so who knows? We might, and we not to spoil even more, but we did not pull any legendaries, so very interesting that we didn't find a legendary and we still got above the old average of cold foils per box. So, oh, Spectral Shield token. Sweet. I would love to get a foil one of this too, because I'm definitely going to be building Prism. I actually will probably build 2 Prism decks. I will probably build Red Zone Rogue's Prism deck, because I think it's a really neat deck, and then build my kind of aggro Prism, and I'll probably just match them up against each other to see how they do, because I'm very, very curious, because I had a totally different idea of where I was going to be taking Prism in Commoner than what Red Zone Rogue did, and I'm very intrigued by his, because she does seem like a really great place to just throw these pummels in and get so much advantage off of it, so I definitely have to try both. Ooh, foil fatigue shot. But yeah, so let us know if there's any particular decks you want to see, or if there's any matchups you want to see too, because we kind of just play them as we see fit, and we don't record every game we play, so we usually have played a lot more matchups than what actually ends up hitting the channel, because sometimes we just play a quick game before we do like the vodcast, and we don't take the time to set everything up, because there is a lot of setup that goes into recording the videos, so sometimes we just do a little like warm-up game or something like that to just have fun and get a better feel for the format too, so that we're not completely talking without knowing. So we do a handful of games, but it's kind of the games that make it to the channel are just whatever we end up doing, usually a lot of mirror matchups, because those are just fun to match up, like Dory versus Kasai, or Ira versus Katsu, or Chain versus Briar, Briar versus Chain. So like those are just fun matchups to see, because they really help you kind of like power check different heroes. But there's a lot of other cool things that we could do or could look at that we're probably missing because we're just not thinking of playing it. It's just not the first thing that comes to our mind, that some other people might want to see that matchup, or maybe we've played it off camera and so we're just like, yeah, we've already done it, but we haven't actually. So let us know, because we can definitely do that. Pretty sweet actually, Red Macho Grande, which I think this is good for like a Bravo control deck. If you want to kind of build the old him deck I built, but do it with Bravo, I think you use this as the finisher instead of Glacial Footsteps. So that's actually pretty cool. Amulet of Havencall and Thunderquake. Well, we've already pulled a cold foil and a handful of Majestics, 4 of them, and we've just making it halfway through the box. This is definitely going to be a much longer video than I intended, but we'll I'll try to edit down. Well, I don't know that I can necessarily cut a bunch of this, but I'll try to speed up the rest of this then and look a little bit more at the cards. Rotary Ram, sweet. I love that card. Drowning Dire, also sweet. Ooh, that's kind of cool. Timekeeper foil. This is a card I'm still going back and forth on whether it should be in a commoner wizard deck. I think now that rares aren't going to be allowed in commoner again, this does change the dynamic for wizard a lot more, and I think you can start getting away with stuff like this. Because before, there was a couple of rares that were just more important to the deck, that like trying to jam even more cards in was going to be difficult, but I think now without the rares, stuff like Timekeeper's Whim is actually worth looking at, because essentially if you play it during your opponent's turn, you put it on the bottom of your deck, so it cycles back in, which is nice. It does cost 3, but it deals a ton of damage. It deals 5 on the red one, so, and that is a red foil, which is cool, because those are the most valuable foils, because they're the ones you're most likely to use. We have another Majestic. We have Aether Wildfire and an Amulet. Tons of amulets. That is kind of the story of this set. As for like my commoner wish list, there's definitely some things where it's like, there's some rares I would love to see added to the format just to get them in, and definitely I would love to see Data Doll get some help. There's not nearly enough Mechanologist items in commoner, so that's one of the things I would love to see is some more Mechanologist support, particularly in the items category, because Dash is already in a pretty good spot. But then, too, I would love to see Majestic Heroes added in, although only if they ban Yorick, because Yorick does not belong in this format. I don't think Yorick belongs in any format that's a competitive 1v1 format. I think playing Ultimate Pit Fighter with your friends and having Yorick is fun, or having just your own Yorick format, as you might call it. I think that's really fun, a really cool place for Yorick, but I would not want to see him in a competitive 1v1 environment. I think that would be terrible. And I have a feeling they won't give us the higher rarity heroes to avoid that, but I would rather they just ban Yorick and give us those heroes, so that we can use things like Lysander, although I know she's coming in Uprising, and Genius. Genius would be really sweet. Ooh, Probably is not a very good card, but it is a very cool foil. I know, this camera's not showcasing the foils well. And it's not the best lighting I have in place, but it's kind of hard for me to get good enough lighting into this spot. But I would love to see the Majestic Heroes added so that we could play things like Genus, Valda. I'd love to even see Legendaries, because I don't think Shiana would be good, but it would be cool to have another format you could play Shiana in. That was one of the rude things with the original Commoner format, is that Channel Fireball, their art that they used for promoting Commoner was Shiana. I would love to see her added. I don't think she'd be good, but she would actually get a card because Ira does have a specialization in common. She's the only hero in the entire format that has a specialization card available. But, ooh, silver token. Field Intentions. That was the card I planned to build a Prism deck around, where it's basically just Phantasmify big attacks. Yeah, so I would love to see all the heroes get added to Commoner, just so you can play all these different decks and have all these fun things. And if they add Majestics, we'd get the new Dorinthia, for example. And if we added Majestic Weapons, we'd get the new Dorinthia weapon, because we need that weapon to make that Dorinthia worth anything. The problem being, and really they could have printed that new Dawnblade as like a rare. And because that would probably be better. We don't really want better than rare equipment. I think Commoner is much better for having commons only and just 2 rare slots for equipment, because there's definitely some equipment that does not belong in Commoner, like Find All Spring Tunic or Duskblade. I would not want to, in any stretch of the imagination, see a world in which Duskblade was legal in Commoner. So I would love to see the Majestic Heroes, though. That I think is fair. I think leaving it as the rare equipment. And I'm very happy with the way they did that, allowing up to 2 rare equipments. Because if you play someone like Kasai, you're costed into using both Centauri Sabers. But with other heroes that aren't costed into that, like that's one way to balance Kasai, is that she has to use her rares for the Centauri Sabers or she does nothing. But then the other warriors, they don't have to make that investment. They can do other things with their rare slots, which allows you to use things like Arcane Lantern, which is really nice because if you could bring in an offhand weapon that does the Arcane Barrier for you, so you can keep more of your like powerful equipment in play without having to sideboard in stuff, that's actually such a huge advantage for some of the decks that get away with that. Ooh, is that a foil rare? No, it's foil common. Ooh. What is it? Oh, it's a blue, so it's fairly playable. That's sweet. Yeah, so that's just kind of one of those things that I love the way they did it. I think it's a very, very clever way to give exactly the amount of stuff we needed, but without breaking the format. Or advantaging someone. Because if it was just like, oh, Kasai can use her sabers and nobody else can, that would have been very, very bad for the format. But ultimately, I think they came up with a good answer. I just think they should add the Majestic Heroes. And I will keep banging that drum until it happens, or they print those Majestic Heroes at a lower rarity. I would be interested, and this is a podcast topic that'll be coming one day, is just talking about what rares we'd like to see rarity shifted, essentially. Maybe we'll even include like Majestic equipment that could be rarity shifted down. Just because I think there are some cards that would be cool to bring into the format. I think there are some that would not be imbalanced. Ooh, foil bad beats. But there's also some that definitely shouldn't be rarity shifted, so... Ooh, Scour. Yeah, Majestic Wizard card. We've done pretty well on the Majestics. And again, Cold Foil, that was one of the more exciting ones I could get. It's one that's actually playable in Commoner, which basically... I think that may be the only Cold Foil that would be playable in Commoner. I'd have to check the list, but I think that's the only Commoner playable Cold Foil, so... in the whole set, so that's really, really cool. And very, very coincidental. But, other than that, like, the deck... or this box has been fairly good to us, so that's not bad. Ooh, Red Shrill, foil yellow Reeking Corruption. A Reek of Corruption. Just the least playable, unfortunately. A couple of rares. How many packs we have left? Oh, Lord, more than I thought. I thought I was almost to the bottom. So the hopes and dreams are still alive for a legendary. Or another majestic hero. That would be pretty exciting too. Or some of the majestic equipment. Those would also be pretty cool. Veiled Intention. Prolific Payload. This is why there's so many good, like, commoner staples. Like, Payload is immediately one of the best Mechanologist cards in the game now. Like, right off the bat. And there's just so many cool things like Veiled Intentions. And the Brute got so many good cards in this set. Which it really needed. So I'm certainly not complaining on that. And that's kind of the reason for opening another one of these boxes, that there's a lot of cards I'm going to end up using from this box. Foil Life of the Party, and I did cheat a little bit and saw the next card. We have a second cold foil, and now we have the cold foil amulet. So there must just be a higher rate of cold foils in Everfest, because that's 2 in this box, which is what happened with the previous one too. Ooh, Ringblade Incantation. That would have been cool if it was impoverished. That's one I would love to see rarity shifted, but... We have Potion of Deja Vu, which is the one that puts cards back into your deck from your pitch zone, I believe. Actually a pretty cool cold foil. Most of the amulets are. They're just, unfortunately, not super playable cards. But we'll put our cold foils over here. But there we go, 2 cold foils. That probably squashes our hopes of getting a legendary. If we did, that would be insane. Then we would have 3 cold foils, but probably not going to see that. So now we're just hoping for a couple of good majestics, or some good foils, like rainbow foils. We still don't have a rainbow foil spectral shield, so would love to see that. That would be one of the big ones, especially as I'm talking about like all the prism things that I want to do. Ooh, foil Veiled Intentions blue. Which is actually not that bad. Most pump spells at blue are bad, but like Veiled Intentions gives +2, which still makes it just 1 shorter of a red Come to Fight, for example, while pitching for 3. So that's actually not a terrible one, and I could see myself playing it. Man, 100 Winds, that's another card I would love to see rarity shifted, because this was going to be such a fun Katsu deck to build. It was not going to be good, but I was going to enjoy building it, so I would love to see 100 Winds Katsu in Commoner, but not to be yet. Anyways, maybe years from now they'll be like, all right, it's time to rarity shift things. All right, let's see. In the Swing is such a good card, but also such a problematic card. If you watch the Kasai and Dorinthia video, I spent half of that video with multiple In the Swings in my hand or arsenal that were just trapped there. It was a very, very unfortunate situation. Ooh, foil red Shrill. That is great. That is like the best Runeblade card in the set to get. For Commoner anyways. Ooh, Signal Jammer. Sweet. Another Mechanologist item that sadly isn't in Commoner, so we can't give it to our poor and suffering Data Doll. I suppose we haven't recorded a gameplay video with Data Doll. We did play one. I actually ended up playing the Data Doll, and it was not close. Absolutely destroyed by Levia. But we didn't record that one, and that was also when there was rares in the format. So we have to kind of tweak the Data Doll deck to make up for we have to take out the rares, and it's such a bad situation for Data Doll right now, because the advantage of her, what she loses a card in hand for, is getting to put items into play for free. But they have to be Mechanologist items, and there's only 3 in Commoner, so it's just a really bad situation for her. I don't even know why it requires Mechanologist items. Like, if it allowed you to put generic items in, it would be slightly better, but it still wouldn't even be good. Ooh, foil In the Swing. I think I do actually use the yellow one, so it's a really nice foil. It's kind of hard to tell in the camera here, but yeah, it's the best I can do. Well, let's see. Look any better on this one? Get this one to focus? No? Not really? Oh well. And then Emery is Scalding and Talisman of Balance. Alright, we're almost there. 3 more packs to go. I am very excited for Uprising myself, because I'm really happy with the classes they chose. I mean, I definitely could have gone without Ninja again, because they already have an obscenely large card pool, even in Commoner. And they have several heroes to choose from. There are 3, without having a second full printing yet. But I understand why they did, because it is a popular class, and it's only been printed in Welcome to Wrath as a main set. All the other cards come from either like the Ira Hero deck or Crucible and Everfest. So I get why they did it, at least. And the more important part is we're getting an Illusionist and a Wizard. Wizard really needed it. Wizard is the most struggling class out of all the classes, at least prior to Lysander getting printed, because there was only one Wizard up until Everfest. Mechanologist definitely needs it now, because Datadol needs a lot of help. We need a lot more Mechanologist items, that kind of gameplay. And I would just love to see a new... Ooh, what is that? Oh, that's a foil Majestic. Fire breathing. I would just love to see a new Mechanologist hero, and what other sort of styles or forms of gameplay you could kind of explore with them. So I would love to see that added. I think it would be really good. And so I'm very much looking forward to when we get to that. But Illusionist, there was only Prism, and like Wizard only had Kano and the one Lysander. So I'm definitely happy they chose those 2, and we're getting to see them. I'm most excited about the Wizard, as I mentioned earlier, because the Wizard is a very different way of playing the game. And so I'm excited to see what that is, especially if Control Wizard is a thing, because I built Oldhim Control. The Lexi deck is kind of a tempo deck, which is aggro control. And I think there's definitely a number of other ways you could kind of build a control deck. But like a Frost Wizard would be the first traditional control feeling deck, I feel, where it's like all focused around making your opponent discard or be unable to do things on their turns. Like instead of countering, you're loading them up with Frostbite so that they just can't play anything and stuff like that. So it's much more of a traditional control aspect, and I hate control decks. I am an aggro player to like my core, or a tempo player. Like tempo decks are some traditional control feeling deck, I feel, where it's like all focused around making your opponent discard or be unable to do things on their turns. Like instead of countering, you're loading them up with Frostbite so that they just can't play anything and stuff like that. So it's much more of a traditional, the decks I enjoy the most. But every so often, you want to do something different. You want to just be the true villain that plays control. And also, too, it is just healthy for the game to have many different decks and many different ways to play. So I think control is one of the archetypes that's been pretty neglected so far, because it's just kind of hard to really make work in this sort of card game. I think it's definitely doable. It's just... you have to really think outside of the box, and it kind of gets to that same problem I talked about, where they just don't have enough alternate ways to win, so it's hard to play control, or like think of how to be a control deck when you still have to kill them. And I know a lot of Magic control decks do that too, but you're usually killing them with the lands or something like that, like these very unusual things, whereas like in this is like you're going to have to use an attack and kill them, and so you have to have more attacks in your deck than, say, a Magic control deck has to have finishers, because one attack is not enough to kill them. So it kind of doesn't feel as much like a control deck when, say, you're playing Oldhim like I was, and, you know, still 70% of your deck or more is attacks. So it doesn't feel quite as much like a traditional control deck. So, final pack. Will we get a legendary or another majestic hero or equipment? Probably not, but I'm very happy with where the box has been already. I got my Genus, I got my Cold Foil Arcane Lantern. I'm chilling. And I got a foil Frostbite token, which is cool for all those control decks I was just talking about. But, yeah, I'm very happy to see that they're going to be doing a Frost Wizard, and I hope it ends up being a really, really cool deck for the game, and just a very different way to play. I would be very excited in that, and it's probably going to be one of the very first Uprising decks I build, because I'm not super interested in the Ninja, and I don't really know enough about the Illusionist to say whether she's going to be a ton of fun to build. And that was our foil, right? Read the glide path. At least it's a commoner foil. And then, life of the party, and our last card. Ooh! We did get one of the Majestic equipment. Well, that's sick. Yeah, Kraken's Aether Vine. Sadly, we can't use it. I would love this card to be rarity shifted into commoner, by the way. This is such an insanely sweet wizard card, because what it does is it costs 3, so it is expensive. It's not cheap, fair and balanced, but it deals 1 damage to target opposing hero, and then you draw a card for each damage dealt that way. So what you can do is that the wizard has a ton of ways to increase the amount of damage that something does. So you can pump this and then potentially draw a bunch of cards. I don't know how many things would allow you to pump damage coming from this specifically. I'd have to look at the wizard cards again and what the things that pump arcane damage, if they do specify arcane. It probably does specify arcane damage, so it should pump that as well. But it's one of those things that you could draw a ton of cards off that and have a crazy combo turn. And the nice thing is, it's always cool when you can have a weapon that kills your opponent, because you don't have to worry about the mill outcome that much. So, one other quick thing we'll do, just gonna real quick cut. Figure the last cool thing I can do for this video is I'm gonna showcase one of my non-commoner decks. I have very few. I still have the Blitz Precons from Monarch, but other than that, I have a classic constructed dash deck. Again, not necessarily full budget, because I don't have Arcanite Skullcap, but I do have Foundry Heart, and I do have the Majestic Hat from Crucible War, because I pulled it from a pack. But this is probably my more beloved deck I have that's not a commoner deck. Because I have played it a couple of times, although never competitively at a tournament, but I have played it just for fun against certain decks, and that is my Blitz Cano deck. So, my pride and joy, let's take it out of the sleeve to make it a little bit easier to see, my foil Young Cano. It's a little hard to tell because everything's double sleeved in this. Alright, we'll try this. We'll try this a little bit better. Yeah, you can see it a little bit there. Took me a while. I had to wait for this. Trying to find any of these foil young heroes is like needle in a haystack. They pop up every couple of months on TCG Player in just 1 copy, so it took me a while to get it. I've got a cold foil Crucible of the Aether Vein, or Aether Weave, foil Talismanic Lens, which is actually really good in Cano, so I don't miss the Arcanite Skullcap that much. Findalls that I pulled from Crucible, so it is a non-foil one. Foil Metacarpus Nodes, really sweet. I do have a Storm Striders as well, and then foil Aether Conduit, and a foil Robe of Rapture. The sideboard's not complete, because obviously I'm not using all the slots that I can, and you would take all 11 slots, because why not? But I have all the important cards, essentially. Again, the big thing that's missing is the Arcanite Skullcap, because you would run it. It's such a broken card, but yeah, so let's take a look at the main board. The only card I'm missing from the main board, the only card, although I haven't upgraded it, this was finished before Everfest came out, so I would have to look at the Everfest cards again, see if anything needs to change in this list to add those in. But other than that, the only card missing from this entire main board is 1 copy of Eye of Ophidia, which isn't a huge deal because it's just a pitch for 3 that opts, which is really good in this deck, but it's not your win condition or anything like that. So we've got our Stir the Aether Winds, our Energy Potions, Cindering Foresights, Time Snaps, Aether Spindles, Voltic Bolt, which I have the full art foil promo one because it's just so sick looking. Tome of the Aether Wind. Yes, the sweet win condition, Forked Lightning. Imagine if they printed that in Commoner. I'd love to see a nerfed version of this make it into Commoner, but probably won't and might not be healthy for the format if it did, so it's probably not a bad deal that it doesn't. Got Nourishing Emptinesses too, to kind of increase your intellect, draw you more cards. Blazing Aether, which is a really, really sweet foil. I love this card. It's so sweet. Scalding Rains, more Blazing Aethers. Gaze the Ages, that's another really, really cool foil. Just a nice opt spell as well. Whispers of the Oracle, which actually makes it into this like non-budget, non-commoner deck, which is cool. And you'll notice a lot of these cards are actually commoner, like Whisper, Scalding Rain, Voltic Bolt. Like, there's a lot of very powerful cards in commoner that are still in this kind of list. But the problem is the big finishers are missing, like Lesson and Lava to fetch stuff out, Sonic Boom, and Blazing Aether and Forked Lightning are missing from the commoner format. So that's the big problem, is that a lot of the like good mechanic pieces are in the format, but you're missing the finishers. So that's the big thing that like aggro, or like, yeah, aggro is the best way to put it. Aggro Cano is missing in commoners, that it needs those finishers. So hopefully we get some neat ones in the new set, or just another neat way to play, because I could see that being a cool way to play Control, is just like a lot of frost stuff to slow your opponent down, and you just slowly Voltic Bolt them down. But yeah, thanks everyone for watching. That was my 2-year video. I hope you enjoyed the video, and looking forward to a lot more commoner content, because it's definitely coming. A lot of it's already edited and ready to go, and plenty more lined up to be filmed, that sort of thing. So yeah, if you like the video, leave a like, comment below, and subscribe for more Flesh and Blood content, and hopefully another great year of videos.